I don't know about former teacher, I'm still a teacher, but nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, I think you've had a very long day and I stand between you and supper. So I've looked at the program and it's really quite some heavy stuff that you've been going through. So I'm supposed to be leaving you with a bang. Now, I have a sixth sense of humor, so I'm not sure what that truly means. But nevertheless, I will try and give you my interpretation of that. But before we get started, I'd like all of you to stand. And I'd like you to give me a clap. No, too much. Overdone, stop. All I want is a single clap, and this is how you're going to do it, okay? But please be careful, you're not allowed to assault the person next to you, okay? So hands out wide, okay? And just a single clap, okay? Now, this is the rule. I'm going to do it again, but this time, hold your pose. So when your hands come together, make certain that you stay in that pose because we're going to analyze that. I'm not a psychologist, but I will analyze it nevertheless. Okay, so let's do it. Hands apart and okay, now I want you to take a look at your thumbs. Those of you who have your left thumb over the right thumb, are there any of you who have that? Please, let's have a look at that. Let me see. Put up your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, now research has actually found that those who end up with the left thumb over the right thumb are naturally attractive people. No, wait, hold on. I didn't ask you to stop from that pose. Now, those of you who had the right thumb over the left thumb, let's see. Okay, congratulations. You guys are the real thinkers in this world. Now, those of you who had both thumbs next to each other, how many of you are out there? Yeah, you think that you're the most attractive in the world. You can take your seats. Now that I've got you thinking about that, hopefully that's going to leave you with a bang. Folks, I wanted to talk to you today about something that I hold very important in my life. But before I actually get to my topic for the day, I wanted to firstly talk about the average working person. And you will find that the average working person generally wakes up at about 6 a.m. They take about an hour to get ready. Oh, well, we're not talking about men here. That's like 15 minutes, right? Okay. You generally take, depending where you live, of course, at least an hour to get to work. And you spend at least 8 hours at work. And then again, you take about an hour to get back home. So if you look at it, these statistics say something very important about us as working people. But also you find that many of you only sleep at 10 p.m. And some of you, of course, go on much longer, but I'm not going to ask what you do after hours. That's your business. But the reality is, if we take all of these statistics and put them together, you'll find that the average person spends 63% of his or her waking day on work or work-related activities. Now, that is frightening, that 63% of your waking day. So really, very little is left, and that time is spent asleep. But of that waking day, 50% is spent at the workplace. So this is extremely important that I wanted to set the ground for you in terms of what the average working person is actually faced with on a daily basis. And
I love my job. It's Monday! Monday morning! Yes! 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 It's Monday! It's Monday! Yes! I can't wait to go to work! I'm going to work! Yes, I'm going to work!
Sure. I am tired after watching all of that. How many of you actually wake up feeling like this on a Monday morning? No, none of you. How many of you can honestly tell me your staff feel like this every Monday morning? One person. You brave. Well, colleagues, the important thing that what this little video clip was showing us is humor in the workplace. Now, I know you've got a totally different title there, redefining the boardroom and redefining the workplace, etc. But I have to confess, the title was always meant to be humor in the workplace. But when Patrick invited me to speak, he asked me and he says, Anesh, what are you going to come and talk about? So I said, look, I don't know. What do you want me to talk about? So he wanted me to do something sexy. So I said, okay, look, I'm going to come and do what I want to do nevertheless, but you can go and put over there anything that sounds sexy to you. So he put that fancy title, but I knew what I wanted to come and talk about, especially at this hour. I certainly didn't want to come and tell you about how not to be fraudulent and how to do all sorts of forensic investigations, etc. So hopefully I'm going to be able to share some insights in terms of humor and how it has worked for me in the workplace, and more importantly is how it sometimes can go totally wrong. It has been found, and this is research that has been conducted by industrial psychologists, that humor is very closely connected with creativity. They believe that people who have a good sense of humor generally are people who have a high level of intelligence. Now, I can see some of you are trying to hide your faces because maybe you're not too humorous, but nevertheless, it doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. But it has been found psychologically that intelligence and humor have a very close relationship. But linked with that as well, they have found that humorous people have this level of intelligence and can be very creative. And also when you look at some of the humorous people, they are very creative themselves. Now you all are familiar with Trevor Noah. And of course, he's a very creative person. He can basically change anything into a joke. Just looking at Trevor, sometimes you want to laugh. I mean, I've also thought that I want to have a role model, and Trevor has become mine, except that I'm Trevor Naidu. But that's my alter ego. But coming back to the reality of humor and creativity, if you have a working place that is harmonious, where people are laughing, people are happy, you'll find that productivity will increase, and that is extremely important. And this is what all of us want when we go to the workplace. We want to get the best out of people, we want people involved, and we want them to give off the best for themselves and for the organization. I'm going to tell you some stories, and it is actually now quite embarrassing to find that there are two people who used to work with me at the Graduate School of Business, because I was going to talk about them. So it's going to be a little difficult, but nevertheless. In terms of the benefits of humor, humor has lots of benefits. For one, it breaks monotony. Now, one of the things that I find extremely boring and really repetitive is when you go to meetings and it's the same old thing. I'm sure many of you can identify with that. And in order to break the monotony of the meetings, now at UKZN, we have a particular structure. There are 6 or 7 things. Those of you who are from here, from UKZN and chair meetings, you've got to do the welcome, the introduction, declaration of interest or conflict of interest, blah, 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 and the rest. Okay, so it really gets very boring and monotonous. And what we have done is that I have created a small sort of competition. There are 2 guys on the committee at my school who regularly go through the minutes in advance, and they go and pick out all the errors. So I give them a challenge. So these 2 are always fighting against each other. So Phil, is it going to be you? Is it you, Sanjeev? Who's going to win today? It gets some laughter going, and people actually get interested in now looking for some of the errors in the minutes as well, except that I've tricked them. I now check the minutes myself before it gets to the meeting. So their score for the last meeting was 0-0. But that's just one way of breaking the monotony with some kind of light-hearted humor. It also increases team spirit, and this is something, and Kiru is sitting over here, and as I said, I was going to talk about the Graduate School of Business. But one of the things that we did when I used to be at the business school is we had a seating area, and we all had lunch at 1 o'clock. Everybody sat together, the academics, the support staff, and we'd all have lunch together. We never shared our own food. I mean, I always had better food than everyone else, but I used to buy it at Woolies. But nevertheless, in terms of that team spirit, we had another colleague, Martin Challenor. He was a comedian of note, and he'd always be picking on everyone. And he even picked on me, and that was fine, because we knew that it was non-threatening, it was not picking on the person, but it was just simply to try and ensure that we had a good spirit going on. So that was something that was very important in building the cohesion and why we were able to build that school to the point that we were able to. It certainly eases tension. I don't know if any of you realized when you were laughing earlier on, and also when you were watching Mike, that your bums got a little less intense. Anyone felt? Okay, now, strange but true, right? Strange but true, that is where your tension actually sits, okay? So most of the time with humor, your entire body relaxes, and what happens is that it releases some of that tension. Okay, and of course, the less tension that you carry in your bodies, that is going to improve your health. Now, I don't have to say anything more about this, because you know, when you go to your doctor, you go to your physician, he checks you out, and he says, you know what, you are highly stressed. Why are you stressed? Because you have work pressures. And what do you need to do? You need to ease that tension. So one of the ways of easing that tension is through humor. And if you are not creating that humorous environment in the workplace, it's just going to be this dull, dreary place that you're not going to feel like Mike, and you're not going to want to go there on Monday mornings. Socializing, I don't have to say too much more about socializing, except for the fact that you'll find that people tend to gravitate towards the comedians in the room, because they're the people that has a little audience around them. There's always laughter and mirth coming from them, and people naturally go towards them. So socializing starts developing from the people who are generally a lot more humorous. But very important is that it builds culture. Now, as many of you are aware, UKZN has a new Vice Chancellor, Dr. Albert van Jaarsveld. He is actually trying to create this culture at UKZN. He has introduced humor into our meetings. He has made it a fun place. There was a time when we went to Senate, and it was really a very dull place to go to. But he is so natural. He doesn't plan his jokes, but he'll find something humorous in the middle of a sentence, and next thing he's talking about it, or he might crack a joke or one-liner. But it just gets everybody laughing, and more importantly, it releases the tension within the room. When we had one of the launches of the REACH principles at the university a couple of weeks ago, we had protesters who came to the meeting. Dr. van Jaarsveld didn't treat them as if they were there as a threat. He stood up, he smiled, he had them with their placards on either side of him, and he had fun and embraced them in this whole humorous scenario that he was trying to create. And even when he was speaking to everyone, he brought in humor in that as well. So this culture of having a humorous, fun workplace is extremely important for us. I don't know if any of you have ever wondered why your boss is as slim as he or she is, but if you are not aware, some of you are. Okay, well, you see, the thing is that most of our institutions actually give them liberties to have free workouts at work at your expense, because he or she burns 100 calories for passing the buck, 200 calories for jumping on your head, 300 calories for beating around the bush, 800 calories for jumping to conclusions, and 900 calories for making mountains out of molehills. Now, as you can see, I must be having much bigger stuff than I am. Okay, but nevertheless, in terms of the benefits of laughter, once again, research has found that humans laugh at least 17 times a day. Now, obviously, it's not something that you rehearsed, it's not something that you intend, but it is something that happens naturally. This is something that we've all been born with. It's a natural response that comes with being human. So we all laugh at least 17 times a day. This is equivalent to 100 laughs is equivalent to 15 minutes of cycling. So I don't know how much of laughter you had over here thus far, but you've done a fairly decent workout by now. So hopefully by the end of the session, I would have left you having done a decent cycling exercise routine. But more importantly than that is that laughter releases endorphins. And endorphins are extremely important for it's the happiness drug. It is basically something that we have to release. It's a hormonal release that we get either through exercise or alternately through laughter therapy. And it releases these endorphins, which is the feel good. And it's actually also been proven that endorphins have the same strength as, why can't I think of this drug right now? Morphine, okay? It has the same strength as morphine. So the thing is that just be careful that you're not releasing too much or else you're going to be very high. But the reality of it is that we want to have this happy drug in ourselves. It gives you that extra energy. It gives you that will to actually continue. But also, laughter is a social signal. It is a social signal that one is happy. But whilst this is a proven fact, never ever take laughter to mean that a person genuinely is happy. Because some people laugh and try and hide the pain that they're actually trying to cover. And as good managers, as good leaders, we need to be sensitive to that. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that just now. Something that I already have given you the example of is that when the boss laughs, everyone else laughs with him. Because if you think about it, if the boss is a very severe, stern kind of person, you're not going to really want to laugh yourself because you're either laughing and sniggering at what an idiot he is, or alternately, you don't know what to do when you find something genuinely funny. So the reality is if the boss laughs, everyone finds it much easier to laugh with him. But as I said, beware. Humor can hurt. And this is something that many of us, it's very easy to go and tell a joke and you don't realize that, hold on, maybe you're hurting someone's own sensitivities. You might be talking very flippantly about death. You might be talking very flippantly about suicide. And someone might have actually lived that. So sometimes humor can be misguided and it can create a lot more problems than were actually intended by the person who is trying to be humorous. It can be misunderstood. And this is something that, some people read too deeply into things. You might be saying something that was just genuinely meant to be funny, and the person takes it as an insult. And that is where you're actually looking for all sorts of trouble if the person doesn't quite understand that you actually meant no harm. This is very important, especially in the South African situation. You should be apolitical when it comes to your humor. The minute you start picking on people in terms of their racial backgrounds, you start speaking about stereotyping, etc., you're going to find that people are going to resist, especially if they're extremely sensitive about their backgrounds. You need to control your humor. You can't be laughing all the time, certainly not in an important meeting, because if you're laughing throughout the entire meeting, when does the actual work get done? So as much as I had you laughing at the start of the session, you've all been listening very intently thus far. So I had to control it to ensure that you're not going to say, hey, what was this guy here to do? Is he really just Trevor Noah, or is he genuinely over here to try and pass a message to us? In terms of humor being clean, friends, when it comes to below the belt humor, be very sensitive, because sometimes it can even be construed as harassment. Because you send an innocent email to somebody thinking that, hey, you know what, this was a nice joke, or maybe you found a picture that was fairly humorous. Others might not see it that way. I mean, the previous speaker had the picture of the carrot and the I think there was a nail or something like that. Now, I mean, at the end of the day, some might have seen that as purely humorous, and others might have actually seen it as sexually inappropriate, etc. Or someone might have seen it as harassment. So just be very careful with how you use humor, especially in the workplace. Now, what can you do to create a humorous workplace? Now, I think it is very important that you hire competent employees who have a decent sense of humor. Now, I'm not saying when you're doing your adverts to have one of your minimum requirements is have a sense of humor. Okay, you've got to be able to measure that, by having some kind of relaxed situation in the interview room where you are able to test whether the person has a good sense of humor or not. Of course, it doesn't mean if the person doesn't have a good sense of humor, don't employ him. There might be other skills that he has. But this should be something that you should be looking for, that the person fits into the team and the team culture that you have in your organization. It is important, as I said, to provide challenging work, because people who have a good sense of humor, they're willing to take on the extra work. They will laugh about it. They will say, you know what, it really doesn't matter that the boss is overloading me, and they'll make a joke of it. So it is generally good to give people a challenge, because it gets them and their creative juices working in order that they can give you the best of themselves. Hiring humor consultants. When I saw this in one of the sets of research that I did, I just said, my goodness, now do I qualify as a humor consultant? Now, I really don't know what a humor consultant is, certainly from a South African perspective. But nevertheless, there's a gentleman in the back with the yellow tie. He's smiling a lot now, so I don't know. You're a humor consultant? Okay, but nevertheless. But what I'm saying, colleagues, is that I don't know where to find these people. I tried Googling one or two in South Africa, and I haven't found anyone as yet. But as I have mentioned, and I've said this over and over again, is that it is you, the top management, the leadership of the organization, who have to create this culture. Because a good culture, a happy culture, is something that we all want. We all want 360 mics coming to work on a daily basis. Not just on the Monday, but all 7 days as well. And one company that has really used humor very effectively from a cultural perspective is Kulula.
Is a great handy fanning device to show you pretty pictures of escape routes, oxygen masks, and flotation devices. It will also show you the famous brace position that you must adopt in the event of emergency landing. Our aircraft, the Boeing 737-400, it has got 8 emergency exits, and the super crew do Macarena dance once again and point them out to you now. 2 doors up front, 4 overwing exits, and 2 doors right at the back. Macarena. Folks, you'll help you find your way to the exits. So those seats there are marked exits on edges, covers, and stunning green, and additional floor lighting at floor level in the aisles, disco style. In the unlikely event of Bafana winning the World Cup, on the unlikely event of a loss of cabin pressure, oxygen mask will drop automatically from a sail pile above you on your left as well as your right hand side. Stop screaming, give your neighbor a quick step, grab the mask, pull it towards you, quickly cover your nose and mouth, and continue to breathe normally. In the unlikely event of water landing, you'll find your very own Quicksilver life jacket under your seat. On instruction from the crew, remove your jacket from its pouch, pull it over your head, fasten its tape tightly around your waist. You may only inflate your jackets only when you leave the aircraft by pulling on the red tags. Ladies, this will give us a new Pamela Anderson look, eh? For reinflation, you've got a mouthpiece, and to keep in contact, you've got a light. This light, of course, is to shine to the Devon sharks and not the blowballs. Cell phones, all mix of cell phones, fancy ones with the in-flight mode, raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, as a leaf switched off. More than welcome to use your lawnmowers, iPods, MP3 players, PSPs, washing machines, or hair dryers, only during the cruise phase of the flight. This is a non-smoking flight. True smoke, and our toilets are monitored by smoke detectors. Tampering with the smoke detector is considered a serious offense. Thank you so much for your attention. We'd much now to sit back, relax your feet, enjoy this flight with us to Durban. Thank you, folks. Enjoy.
This is an example that has actually come from one of the flights, one of the Kulula flights. Somebody was sitting over there. The quality wasn't too great, but they were sitting there with their phone and they filmed the entire situation. So those of you who picked up the few jokes, there were things about you're going to have a Pamela Anderson figure, and there were things about Quicksilver, life vest, etc., etc. So Kulula have introduced that humor onto the planes. There was a stage apparently when even the captains used to say things like, in the unlikely event that we take off from the ground. Now, that leaves you thinking about a whole host of things. But as you can see, they have taken that humor throughout. You go to their websites, you go to their adverts, and you find that they're pretty interesting adverts. Nando's as well, they have used a whole lot of humor, but that's more in their advertising. But in terms of the actual culture, go to Nando's and these guys are cooking behind those hot burners, and they really don't have a very good sense of humor. So very different from what you see on TV versus the poor guy who's having to burn those chickens on your behalf. But the point that I wanted to make is that you need to let humor happen. Sometimes it's not something that you go scripting your jokes and your comedic routines, because that can be dangerous, as I've said. So it is important that you allow humor to happen, and sometimes look at the humorous situations when you're sitting either in a meeting or in some kind of situation, and try and use that to come up with some kind of light-hearted method of trying to ease the tension in the room. I've seen an application letter, and this was one of the examples, and this was something I found pretty funny. Please don't misconstrue my 14 jobs as job hopping. I have never quit a job. So that says something about this person. I mean, if they haven't quit a job, but they've been to 14 jobs, what happened? Okay, but that was something that we were able to have a good laugh about. And very often you find these strange little quirks that come up on some of the CVs that you get. Reason for leaving the last job, they insisted that all employees get to work by 8:45 a.m. every morning. I couldn't work under those conditions. So tells you about the person and their willingness to actually come to work. But on a more serious note, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this little man. Okay, that is the laughing Buddha. And I used this little picture of him to illustrate the point that even the Buddha, who is a spiritual head, a spiritual leader in his time, even he used to laugh, and he had this particular pose known as the laughing Buddha. And one of the things that, one of the major quotes that he contributed is that laughter is always there, waiting to be born into the moment by our simple allowance of it. So I've actually been watching you over here, and some of you haven't really been finding this too humorous. You found it a bit too serious. But nevertheless, laughter is not something that you can avoid. It is something that you need to embrace. It is important for you. It is important for your soul. Something that was seen on a performance appraisal and not something that I've seen on anyone's performance appraisal. Some drink from the fountain of knowledge. O'Brien only gargled. Now, I want to pose a challenge for you. Can we all be like Mike? How many of you think you can be like Mike? Okay, can I see a show of hands? I know it's late in the day. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. I want 5 volunteers, please. 5, Mike is high maintenance, don't worry. I want 5 volunteers. So the lady who said that Mike is high maintenance, you're one of our volunteers. 4 more. 4 more. Please come through. Come through, my dear. 2 more. One more. Oh, okay. One more. 1 male, 3 ladies. Ah, there we go. 2 brave men. Okay, guys, were you impressed with Mike? Absolutely. Do you think you can do his moves?
Hell no. I'm getting cramps.
You're going to get cramps. Okay, well, this is why I didn't want to actually demonstrate this for you. Now, I think it went something like this, okay? His hands were all out, right? And then it was at the knees. Come on, let's see you do that now. Let's go. Right? Hands out, legs together. Now, these were 5 extremely brave people. Now, the rest of you, please stand up. Okay, right, so let's get our hands into place. Right? And this time to music. Come on, guys. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to just conclude by saying that humor doesn't come naturally to everyone, but we all have a funny bone somewhere in our bodies, and you need to find that funny bone. Because as I said, it's not just about being popular, it's not about being the comedian or the funny person in the group, but it's also about your soul. And if you cannot introduce humor, the least that you can do is smile. And if you smile to a person every day, they will smile back at you. Thank you very much.